Jane, my ever-optimistic horror movie aficionado, practically vibrated with nervous excitement. Me? I slumped back on the worn leather couch, glad the ordeal was over. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed a good scare as much as anyone, but these over-the-top horror flicks Jane picked always left me a little jumpy. Giving Jane a lingering kiss goodbye, one that tasted faintly of popcorn, I walked towards my car. Headlights sliced through the inky blackness of the suburban street, illuminating the neatly trimmed lawns and identical houses. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. As I reached my car, a primal urge to check on Jane's house gripped me. It was an illogical feeling, a superstition I usually scoffed at. Looking up, I meant to give the house one last glance before pulling out. And that's when I saw it. There, in the second-story window facing the street, a dark, humanoid figure stood perfectly still. It felt like it was watching me. Panic clawed at my throat, constricting my airways, ignoring the rational part of my brain that whispered it was probably just a trick of the light, or maybe a strategically placed plant. I slammed the car door shut and sprinted back towards the house. I pounded on the door with frantic urgency, the rhythmic thud echoing through the quiet night. The door swung open before my fist could strike again. "Zach, what's wrong?" My words tumbled out in a panicked rush. "There was someone in your window." Jane blinked, confusion momentarily clouding her features. "Someone? What are you talking about?" I grabbed her arm, pulling her back a couple of steps. "Up there," I exclaimed. Jane followed my gaze, her brow creasing in concentration. She squinted into the darkness, the faint moonlight casting long, skeletal shadows across the house. "Zach, there's nothing there," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Doubt gnawed at me. Had I really seen something? The image of the figure, still and silent, was burned into my mind, but with each passing second, it felt more and more like a figment of my imagination, a product of the unsettling movie and the dark emptiness of the night. Jane stepped closer, her hand brushing reassuringly against my arm. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's just check to be sure, okay?" A wave of relief washed over me. The idea of facing whatever was in the window alone was terrifying. Together, we climbed the stairs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The bedroom was bathed in the cool blue light of the television screen. The window was unlocked, a slight draft stirring the sheer curtains. I walked towards it cautiously, my eyes scanning the empty street. There was nothing outside, just the familiar sight of neatly trimmed lawns and darkened houses. Turning back to Jane, I forced a laugh. See, must have been my imagination. Jane, however, wasn't convinced. Her eyes darted around the room, lingering on the shadows cast by the furniture. A shiver danced down my spine. Maybe I wasn't the only one who felt like something was off. We stood there for a moment longer, the silence broken only by the flickering light from downstairs. As I turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind rattled the window pane, sending another shiver down my spine. The adrenaline rush that had propelled me upstairs was fading, replaced by a gnawing unease. Jane, ever the pragmatist, tried to lighten the mood. "Well," she declared, clapping her hands together a little too enthusiastically, "mystery solved. False alarm caused by an overactive imagination fueled by popcorn and horror movies." Despite her attempt at humor, her voice lacked its usual vibrancy. The pale cast to her skin and the way she kept glancing nervously at the windows betrayed her lingering fear. Jane suggested watching something fun to distract from the events of the evening, but even when we settled on the couch and turned on the TV, the tension in the air remained palpable. I decided to stay the night, promising that Jane would be safe no matter what. But when we got into bed, the darkness of the night was gathering around us, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that we weren't alone. The night stretched on, each passing moment weighed down by the heavy silence that enveloped us. Unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere of the house any longer, I rose from the bed, a sense of determination coursing through my veins. I couldn't shake the feeling that something lurked just beyond the edge of my vision, something dark and malevolent that threatened to consume us both. With a shaky breath, I made my way to the window, the darkness outside pressing in on all sides. Peering into the night, I scanned the yard below. my heart pounding in my chest, and then I saw it, a figure, barely visible in the moonlight, lurking behind the trees at the edge of the yard. My blood turned to ice as I watched, paralyzed with fear, as the figure seemed to shift and move, its form flickering in and out of focus like a specter from another realm. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as a chill wind swept through the room, carrying with it a sense of dread that seemed to seep into my very bones. "Jane," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath, "there's someone outside." She joined me at the window, her eyes widening in horror as she caught sight of the figure lurking in the darkness below. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. With a surge of courage born of desperation, I threw open the window, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing into the darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the stillness of the night pressing in around us like a suffocating embrace. And then, from the shadows at the edge of the yard, a voice whispered on the wind, soft and haunting. Driven by a mix of fear and adrenaline, I stepped outside, my voice trembling as I called out into the darkness. "Who's there? Show yourself." My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for a response. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure, seemingly a girl with long black hair and wearing a white nightgown, darted from the tree into the bushes. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Despite every instinct screaming at me to run, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that consumed me. With shaky hands, I reached for a flashlight and cautiously made my way towards the spot where the figure had vanished. Branches rustled ominously in the still night air as I moved deeper into the darkness. Every shadow seemed to hold a sinister secret, and every sound sent chills down my spine, but I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As I reached the spot where the figure had disappeared, a sudden gust of wind sent a chill through me. My flashlight illuminated the dense foliage, revealing nothing but twisted branches and looming darkness. "Zach," a voice called out from behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The beam of my flashlight landed on Jane, her face etched with worry. "Jane, what are you doing out here?" She let out a sigh of relief. "I couldn't just let you go out here alone. It's too dangerous." I hesitated, torn between my fear and my gratitude for her concern. "I know, but I had to see what was out here." Jane nodded understandingly. "I get it, but we should stick together. There's safety in numbers." She reached out and took my hand, her touch sending a jolt of warmth through me. Together, we turned back towards the house. When we finally reached the house, I was so relieved I could have collapsed. We slipped inside, the familiar surroundings a welcome respite from the oppressive darkness outside. Jane suggested we go to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I kept replaying the events of the night, the chilling figure lurking in the shadows, the sudden disappearance into the darkness. "I don't think I can sleep," I admitted. Jane sighed. "I know, this whole thing is unsettling, but we're safe now. We're in the house." She took my hand and led me to the living room. She gestured for me to sit down on the couch, then settled into my lap. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice soothing. "I'm not going anywhere." I wrapped my arms around her, her warmth a comforting shield against the encroaching fear. We sat there for a while, in silence, just holding each other. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted. The morning light brought a fragile sense of security. However, the memory of the figure by the tree gnawed at me relentlessly. "I'm going to check the backyard," I declared, grabbing a baseball bat just in case. The grass under my feet was damp and cold. Approaching the oak tree, I called out hesitantly, "Hey, is anyone there?" The only response was the mocking chirping of birds. Still, as I turned to leave, I decided to take a peek into the shed near the house. The shed door creaked open, revealing a haphazard jumble of gardening tools. My heart pounded in my chest. It was then that a soft whimpering sound caught my attention. In the corner, huddled under a worn tarp, lay a tiny girl. She couldn't have been older than 8, her face smeared with dirt and tears. The girl flinched as I approached, clutching a tattered teddy bear in her hands. In a hoarse voice, she whispered, I ran away." My heart lurched. I immediately knelt down beside her, my voice gentle as I tried to calm her down. "It's okay, little one," I soothed. "You're safe now. What's your name?" She hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Lily." "Lily," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why did you run away?" Lily's eyes welled up with tears. "My daddy," she sobbed. "He was mean. He was always yelling and drinking. I was scared." My blood ran cold. This poor child had been running for her life. I reached out and wrapped my arms around her, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's okay, Lily," I whispered. "You're safe now. I'm not going to let anything hurt you." Lily clung to me, her small body trembling. I held her for a long time, until her sobs subsided and she drifted off to sleep. Gently, I untangled her from my arms and stood up. I knew I had to call the police. I rushed back into the house, my mind racing. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. Within minutes, police cars swarmed the property, sirens wailing. I gently explained what had happened, and the officers listened intently. They took Lily's statement and assured me that they would investigate her father. A social worker arrived shortly after, and she took Lily into her care. Lily looked back at me with big, scared eyes as she was led away, but I gave her a reassuring smile.